We're gonna start with there we go. So welcome to the APNI Leadership webinar, Influencing Upwards. And feel free to use social media as well to engage. If you learn anything today, share your key takeaways on LinkedIn. That's one way to raise your professional profile, or use Instagram as well to share your key takeaways. I'm very excited to have you today. This is our second webinar of the year and third event for 2025. And this year has gone by so fast. I had asked our speaker earlier on how the first quarter of 2025 has been going. She's been saying it's very dynamic, and very true. 2025 has been very dynamic given what is happening in the world. And for us, APNI, an organization as the team, we are always wanting to stay relevant in terms of the resources and support that we provide for the African professional and entrepreneur here in Ireland. Leadership is something that, again, when we look at the world or even look at your own career as well, there is need for us to step up and lead, or maybe there's a need for you to step up as well and chat to your managers around, getting promoted, getting involved to lead new initiatives and programs. So we just felt like there's a need for us to share when it comes to strategies and tools that can support you around leadership. So I'm not going to talk much. My name is Edima Inyang, and I am the African Professional Network of Islands president. Is just a fancy word to say that I lead the organization and the team here at APNI. Really, the three things that drives our motivation, or the ethos here at APNI, is around connection, collaboration, and empowerment. Connection, because again, the world is very dynamic, like Francesca hinted earlier on. There is a need for you to have that access to connection, that access to someone who might introduce you to the next job, someone who might introduce you to the next project, and even someone you might also add value to as well in their life. So APNI exists as a platform to drive those connections, and then collaboration. And most importantly, something that's been key for us this year is around empowerment. So very nice to have you on the call. And if you haven't introduced yourself, please feel free to use the chat box to introduce yourself. Let us know where you're joining and what you do. Here's our agenda for the evening: opening and welcome, which I've done a quick one. I will quickly share a little bit about APNI as an organization, what we do, and then I'll introduce you to our speaker, then hand over to Francesca Hertz, where she's going to share around influencing upwards. And then at the end of our presentation, there'll be Q&A, and we'll have a little bit conversations around community engagement initiative that we have coming up for the next quarter. And we'll leave a few minutes for you to ask us questions. If anybody has any questions around not Q&A, any questions around APNI, and then we'll close and wrap it up for the evening. So what is APNI? APNI is the African Professional Network of Ireland. So I think of this: if you are a black, brown, whatever skin tone, doesn't matter. But if you are of African descent, APNI is a network that exists to support you. We are an award-winning nonprofit organization run by volunteers on a mission to champion and increase representation of professionals of African descent, Afro-Irish here in Ireland. Most recently, we worked with Bank of Ireland to release a report to understand what ethnicity representation and inclusion looks like here in the workplace in Ireland. So if you haven't seen that report, check out Instagram, LinkedIn to stay up to date. So our role here pretty much is to empower professionals, entrepreneurs, like I said earlier on, with resources to have access to economic and employment opportunities. And we do that through various initiatives, which I'm going to share in the next couple of slides. So APNI has existed for 9 years, and we have about 3,700 members within our mailing list, and that is a growing cohort of talent from various industries and different sectors here in Ireland. We are a trusted partner to leading organizations here in Ireland when it comes to attracting top diverse talent, and we also support companies to deliver their social impact initiative. So far, we've worked with about 50 and counting plus companies across various sectors here in Ireland. Like I said, our mission pretty much, again, is to provide resources and support for you. And I'm not going to really draw much into this, but you'll see in the comments chat there's some of our team as well in the joining the webinar today. In terms of our mission and why we decided to host today's webinar, one thing we understand within our community is that barrier when it comes to career progression. We do see that a couple of people get into entry-level roles, but then when they get into the organization, the barriers and the hustle of like pivoting and promoting within the organization. Hence why we have brought Francesca Hart, who is the joint head of enforcement investigations at Central Bank of Ireland, who is really she's gonna share her experience when it comes to navigating, corporate world, when it comes to leadership, when it comes to, again, when you're looking to move from one role to another. Please lean in, lean in and learn from our speaker today, who has like years of experience. I always believe that the story is best told by the person as opposed to myself. So I'm going to shut up now and pass over to Francesca. 1 second. I'll stop sharing my screen just so I can share your slides, if that's okay.
That's okay.
Awesome. No technical issue, but there you go.
There we are. All right. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much. So as you've heard, I'm Francesca Mobola Hart. Can I just check that everyone can hear me? I don't know whether you can sort of tell the administrators or hosts, but I want to be sure that I'm speaking clearly and everyone can hear what I'm saying. Great. I've just got the nod that my audio is good. That's great. So I'm just going to say, to start off with, thank you so much for all of you taking the time out to be here this evening. I know that we all have busy lives, and it's really gratifying that actually you would take some time out, to hear and to join me in sharing my own experiences. And I also want to say thank you to Adima and the team MENA for inviting me. I think there's a little bit of interference in the background. Great. And thank you for inviting me. I think, look, this is one of the things that I am very passionate about. Meeting people, speaking with people, sharing experiences is quite frankly how I think we all learn from each other and how we, and how we come along on this journey. So I've been invited to, just to share with you around leadership and influencing upwards. And the topic of today is a really interesting one because there's no doubt it's really huge. It's vast. There are so many facets to leadership. There's so many facets to influencing and impacting. And I, for one, I am, sort of a believer that, there isn't a one size fits all. We all have, a different journey. So, I will talk you through what my intention is this afternoon is to talk you through my journey, and together we can probably, have a good discussion about those concepts and our experiences. But what I'm not proposing to do is to just talk about the theory of leadership or the theory of influencing upwards, because I think, look, all of us have resources at our fingertips. We can go on the internet, we can look at very many webinars, there's sort of teaching aids, and all of those are really, really useful. And quite frankly, we don't have the time this afternoon to really get into the detail of, the theory of leadership. And I think that there are materials out there that can speak to this far more intelligently and in far more depth than I possibly can. So perhaps if I can ask you, Adima, to move on to the second slide. Thank you. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about me. And the reason I'm going to talk about me is because I'm hoping it will give all of you some context about my journey and sort of how I got to be, where I am. And, some of the experiences that I had in leadership, with leadership and in managing upwards, and also just my career. And what would be really great is, responses from you. So sharing our experiences is what I am totally here for. We can learn from each other, and I think that we're at different stages of our careers, and I think that of itself can be quite instructive. So anything that I do say, and I just want to put a disclaimer out or some sort of caveat out right now, what I'm going to be talking to is something, are things that are my views, there are my opinions, there are my experiences. They're certainly not necessarily, the views of the central bank, and I don't purport to, to speak to them or for any other organization that I am affiliated to. This is really my personal journey. So a little bit about me. So I am that child of first generation immigrants into the UK. My parents were students, went to the UK to study. I was born in the 60s, and I'm typically, one of those quintessential kids of the 60s generation that we call the nanny kids. So parents sent me off to a nanny in some remote town in the west of England to live with a nanny while they were out working and, bettering their lives. But I was taken back to Nigeria when I was 8 to complete my primary education. And then I stayed in Nigeria on and off until I finished my first degree. And when I finished my first degree, I decided that I wanted to come back and I wanted to live in England. And I did. And I went, finished law school in Nigeria. I came to England. I redid my law school so that I could be qualified as a solicitor in England, and I started working in England. And some of you might be thinking, oh my God, why is he, telling us all this? Well, I wanted to tell you that because where I lived in my formative years and my education, my culture impacted my career journey. And I think it's easy for us to think about our career journeys from, I'm just going to leave university, I'm going to jump into a job. And that's all, and that's fine. And I'm not saying that it isn't. But there are some things in our background that I think are formative. And they're very influential along our way in the way that we react, the way we behave in the workplace, our expectations, the way we treat our peers in the workplace. And so I just wanted to put that background out there. And I'm going to be touching on that for, in pockets, through this evening. And I hope that it just brings to life. I wanted to bring to life, some of the things that I'm going to be talking about. So for me, let's go back to leadership. So for me, leadership is definitely a journey. It's a journey that can be really pleasant. It can be picturesque. You can go down, really fantastic meadows. You go to interesting places, and you meet wonderful people along the way and have amazing experiences. But leadership is also something that can be long, like any journey, sometimes frustrating. And the experiences along the way, along this management and leadership journey, can also have a bearing on the destination, where we're getting to, and what that destination feels like when we think we've gotten there. And what I mean by that is, certainly for me and for a lot of my peers, when we started working, our goal was to get to the next stage. We wanted to be a manager. We wanted to be the senior lawyer who was going into the workplace. We wanted to be a barrister. We wanted to be these, fantastic, fantastic things. And I think that for us, being idealistic and being very young, the concept of what it takes to manage other people, whether we're managing our teams, whether we are interacting with our peers, whether we are looking to manage upwards, certainly wasn't a concept for us. But we informed ourselves and we matured and we evolved along the way. But it did inform how we saw our final destination. When we got there, what does it mean for us? What did it mean for me to think that, okay, I'm kind of like where I think I want to be in my leadership journey? And I don't know that I can answer that question because we change as we go along. And there's something about flexibility and also our agility in that journey to be able to absorb the lessons that we learn along the way. So that brings me, and I just want to give a picture of my career journey, and I'm also going to talk to some of those and some of the leadership and management and influencing lessons. So Edima, please, if we can go to the next slide. Okay, so this is one of my favorite slides whenever I'm talking about a career path and a journey, because I think, you know, for many people this will ring true. When we start off our career, I look at this slide every time and it just makes me smile, because it describes me to a T. So it's easy, I think, for me to present myself in the way that I am talking to you. And, you know, it wouldn't be strange for people to think that my path to, you know, from graduating all those years ago at 21 to where I am, that, you know, I just went through the step and, you know, the path was linear and the trajectory was a straight arrow. The reality of it is that my path, like the path of many people in whatever profession you are, tends to go iggly piggly, and it's wiggly, and we have lots of setbacks and we have lots of successes, and but you know, there are life gets in the way, and you know, there's insecurity, there are all manner of things that happen to us in this journey that takes us in slightly different directions. And actually, even where we have a clear path in our mind where we start off, that I'm going to start off, I studied whatever I studied, and I'm going to be the CEO of, you know, Meta or Google or something. If we have that plan in mind, it's amazing how our experiences inform us. And sometimes that can change. Often it does change. And I'm sure that if there were a survey out there which tracked how many people ended up working in an environment in a discipline which they hadn't studied, I'm sure that there will be quite a lot of people. But what I want to tease out about this is that starting out my career journey, the concept of leadership and senior management was something that I associated with other people. And quite frankly, and no offense to anyone, but my image of a senior manager and a leader was somebody who was probably an older man, usually in a suit, carrying briefcases, who wore highly polished, they looked uncomfortable, but highly polished shoes. That was, you know, the image that I had. So if I then project some 40 years, you know, down the line to today, you know, my career path and the journey and what I recognize, lots of trials, lots of errors, heaps of self-doubt, a fair amount of what I still call the imposter syndrome, i.e., yikes, can I really do this? Is this me? You know, people are looking at me as the person who is the authority on this. Do I really know it? Can I go into that room? Can I talk about it with authority? But the one thing that I would say is, for the vast majority, the most part, where I have made progress in my career, where I have seen other people make vast amounts of progress and they have catapulted and they've literally just, you know, been in this great space with their career and their progression, it has largely been around having great relationships with people in the workplace, peers. And I don't discount the power and the strength that we get from, you know, having our own personal community and our own personal, you know, sources of support at home. So that's a given. But I think in the workplace, in being able to make that transition from, you know, starting out as a junior manager or middle manager into a senior leadership role, it is because I have been supported, and that support has also come from being able to have those good relationships with people, and, you know, an ability to be able to not only manage the people around me, but be influential in the way that I have managed upwards. But I have to say that when all this is happening, and it continues to happen when it's happening, I certainly in the early days didn't recognize that what I was doing was managing upwards. And so I just want to go back to what I said in the beginning, that there are so many resources out there that speak to leadership and speak to management in a way that I don't necessarily think that I had access to. And so I would just encourage everybody to make use of all of these resources, because actually it can clarify a lot of, a lot of what we're thinking. It puts a name, it puts a definition to things. It enables us to recognize the stages that we're going through in our lives. And I think that just makes it slightly easier for us to navigate. But I'm just going to come back, so forgive me, I know that I'm going off in a slightly different direction, but I'm going to come back to my journey and why this journey over here looks so squiggly and iggly-piggly. And that is because, as I said in the beginning, look, I was pretty idealistic when I started out. My education and my environment led me to believe, as a young girl, Nigerian kid, being educated, had a great background, had great support. I could be anything, but also, and this is the contrast to that. My culture was West African, and because I was educated in West Africa, not a lot of how things are done in the corporate environment, even in society in Nigeria, necessarily translated to working in the UK. I'll give you an example. I was really deferential. Talking up any form of challenge to my peers wasn't something that or to my superiors rather, wasn't something that I recognized when, I started out. And so my approach to work was, I'm just going to keep my head down. I'm just going to do my job. I'll just get the work done and progression will naturally follow. Networking. What was networking? But fortunately, things have opened up a lot better, and that evolves and that changes and that moves with us as we go along. But I mentioned that because our background, our environment certainly informs us and doesn't always translate in the way that we expect it to translate into the workplace. So that was one of my reflections, but that was just me. Also, confidence in my journey. Did I always feel able? Did I always feel equipped? Did I always feel ready to take on the challenge of leadership? Did I feel able to push through barriers? And what were those barriers? There was the acceptance barrier. There was the barriers that I perhaps put up myself. The barriers of, if I walk into that room, how will I be accepted? So look, and what do I look like? And if I talk, will I be understood? No, all of those things, is my educational background good enough? So look, all of those things sort of informed me. And then the other thing that I thought was quite influential in my journey to how I was able to make the progression into leadership roles was language and communication. Look, we will get onto this later on. I will touch on this later. But what I wanted to say is it was important that I picked up on, and I didn't have that grasp in the early days, of the language of the workplace and being able to deploy strategies that will enable me to get through to the right people at the right moments. And the language of the workplace isn't about grammar. It isn't about accent. It isn't about intonation. But there's something about how is information disseminated around you? How do you extract from that information what you need? And how do we convey that and articulate ourselves in the presence of other people to hone into what's important for them? So there's quite a bit about communication. And, I probably will come back to this later on, but, I just thought that I put that out there for now. Edima, can we move on to the next slide, please? Thank you. So I want to throw these things out, and I really want to sense check the extent to which any of these might be familiar. Bear with me, I'm just busy trying to work my mouse here. So I've put these quotes, on the screen, and I'd really like your responses to these. And that is, so what's going on here? And do any of you recognize these, either about yourself or about people, you've worked with? And it will be good if you can share sort of your thoughts here, because these are the sorts of things that I think, feature quite heavily with a lot of people that I interact with myself. And I have to say that I recognize, some of these as well. And it depends on where you are in your path. So the first one, I get things done, I'm great with my team, but I'm working for a boss who doesn't get it. So what's going on there? The second one, I've followed the pathway. My manager said, if I do this, if I have this project, if I do this, if I network, if I do this, I'll be good. I'm a surefire. What we have this expression, myself and my peers. I have this expression where we say something is a surefire banker. If I do things in a certain way, then it's guaranteed to fall out in a particular way. I'm constantly exceeding my objectives, but I am overlooked. My boss doesn't see me. And the last one there, I am a confident leader who can be relied upon to challenge the status quo. But there is a lot of gatekeeping going on, and I'm not getting in front of the right people. So what's happening? So it would be really good, to sort of read your reflections and whether or not you recognize any of these. Do they ring a bell? Do you recognize them? What are the triggers? So the one thing that I would say, well, I will leave that with you, is in my personal experience. So in my very first role, I worked for the Crown Prosecution Service in the UK. And, I went in as, as a junior admin, person, had a degree, had my law school qualifications, but I went in as an admin officer, which is, hey, look, everybody, treads their own path. And I was passionate. I was passionate at trying to find the way to navigate. I felt that, something was missing. I was missing something. So I would have meetings with my manager, who was an executive officer at the time, and I would say, okay, if I wanted to get to executive officer, what do I need to do? You just tell me what I need to do. I promise you, I will do it. I will do it, to the best of my ability. And so, my objectives were structured around what I thought I wanted. I put my head down. I was constantly, exceeding, processing targets on cases, the case files that I was dealing with. I'd be in the office, early in the morning. I just wanted to get there. And a promotion round came up, and I just didn't get a look in. And I was devastated. I didn't know what had gone wrong. But, I think what that taught me, and there was a process to this of, self-reflection. There was a process of, was I just led down the garden path? Was it a case of my face didn't fit? What was it? And what I realized down the line, and I have to say that this realization didn't come, at that particular time, but what I realized was that I needed to be, the management support that I got from my boss probably equaled the amount of management support that I needed to give to her. Because while it's about what I needed and the steer that I needed for my career, I needed to not let go of what my manager needed to be able to deliver value in her role as well. And my visibility. So sitting in a corner, processing, putting my head down, wasn't going to get me to that next stage, because I wasn't heard. I was barely seen as a good worker, but I was heard. I wasn't heard, and I was barely seen. So I just wanted to put that out there, that when we think about managing up, it is about influencing and collaborating with others, But we ask ourselves the question, why and to what end? And yes, it's fine to do that with the end of achieving the next step and progression. But the context to that is in what circumstances and the how. And for me, that is about understanding managers' my manager's priorities. Sometimes about working style as well, and aligning my efforts, or my efforts being a very, very good processor, aligning those efforts with what my team had to deliver, what my department had to deliver, and my ability to be able to speak to those things and to be seen. So there are a lot of things that sort of come out of these 3 quotes that I've put on the table. And I also, so the one thing that hasn't necessarily happened to me, but I've seen it happen to in the circumstances of a lot of other people, is the 3rd quote there. I'm a confident leader. I'm the one who will always speak up for my team when we're in broader meetings and management meetings. I challenge senior leadership. But there's a lot of gatekeeping on, and I don't know why. For some reason, I'm not getting a look in for promotion, activities. And I think for me, that is about self-awareness of how are my messages? How are they landing? Who are they landing with? And am I being a bit performative? Am I doing this for myself and to show to my team that I am a strong leader? Or really is my challenge of the status quo? Is it moving the organization forward? And in that, am I seen in that as somebody who is who is an asset in that respect? So these are just some of the things that I think, have occurred to me in this journey that I wanted to share. Edima, can we move on to the next one? Thank you so much. So if you were to ask me, what I would say is what's important, I think, in my journey, some of the basics that I've recognized in leadership and management and influence and upwards, is there are 3 fundamentals, and that is understanding our environment. And the second one is understanding our managers and superiors. But I'm going to go wider when we get to managers and superiors. And then our the goals effectively, personal growth, and how they are balanced against organizational goals. Those are the 3 areas. So if I can go back to the first one, understanding the environment. I found in my journey that understanding what is important to the organization is fundamental, because that is the key to seeing where you are and your ability to add value, but also where you see yourself also in your career journey. And understanding the environment is about a lot of things, but it also takes into consideration the external drivers of culture and behavior in the environment and the people that we're working with. Why? The why question. Why is the organization operating in the way that it is? What are the structures within this organization? How do I navigate those? And navigating is all about understanding what you're working with. So that's one of the first things. Understanding your managers and superiors, for me, this is basically understanding the people you are looking to influence or we're looking to manage. So, and there's a common misnomer, I think, that we often feel that the people we should focus on influencing are those we report to or the people who report to us. The fact is, our universe of impact and influence is vastly, infinitely wider than that. And I'm just going to give an example. So I routinely recruit. So I routinely interview for, other people who are coming into my organization who are looking for roles at a slightly junior level. I'm on an interview panel. And There was a role in a previous organization that I worked for, and one of the middle managers was being interviewed for a more senior role. The interview panel, on the interview panel, there was this member of staff's immediate line manager, and then there was myself and another sort of senior executive, but we sat over a slightly different area of the business. Now, the individual who was being interviewed had gone through the interview. His direct line manager was very, very, happy with his performance. And on the technical side, he was absolutely excellent. But then he came down to fit. And his line manager had an issue and just couldn't see himself scoring the candidate highly when it came to fit. Now, fit is one of those things in the early days that I really struggled with. What is fit? Is, your face fits, your demeanor fits. I think it comes down to fundamentally, do people think, your peers think that they can work with you? I think that's what it comes down to. Now, it's not very helpful, but it came down to fit, and his manager just didn't think that at that level that he was applying to be, he was fit, among all the other cohorts in that space. And myself and the other person who was on the panel who had to do the assessment disagreed strongly. And we only disagreed because even though we hadn't worked with this individual personally, we had been at corporate away days and some of those, social events or quasi-social events, but we had been in rooms with this individual candidate, and we felt that we had a measure of him, how he came across, his reasoning and the way, and we objected strongly. And off the back of our scores, this candidate was successful and he got the role. Now, I mention that because, influence and impact, we can tend to think that the only people who we should be bothered, we should focus on are the people who are immediately around us. I'd never worked, and my other colleague had never worked with this person before, but obviously we felt that he was impactful and he could manage and do the job, very well. So the universe of the people who might have an impact and are likely to have an impact on your career, on the next project, how your visibility, your ability to be able to, step up into a role are likely in a lot of instances to come from more than just your manager or more than your manager's manager. There's a family unit. There's sort of a universe around that. So essentially what I'm saying here is it is something that we need to tap into when we're thinking about understanding sort of our environment and understanding the people that we are working with. And I think when it comes to understanding the people you're influencing, we also have to understand their drivers. We have to understand their pressures, but also fundamentally check in so that we are on top of understanding their expectations. Do they encourage challenge? Do they pay attention to diverse views? How do they react when things go wrong? How does a person receive news of any kind? Because understanding those things mean that we can ensure that we are tailoring our communication, we are tailoring our interaction, I think, to ensure that we are heard and that our messages land with those people in the way that we want them to learn. I think it's about learning those strategies to be able to cut through and get through to the people that we're dealing with. And then on the issue of personal growth and organizational goals. So it's really important, I think, for me in my career advancement to really think about, what I wanted and where I was going. My influence, what was my influencing upwards and my managing upwards? To what end was that? Where am I going with this? And the reason that I say that is because, look, whether we like it or not, I think in a lot of places, managing upwards and influencing upwards is associated, also has, some elements of not so positive connotations. Who is that person who is always in the sort of manager's ear, or always in the senior leader's ear, and wants to always have some of their time? So it can come with its own baggage. And I think that as long as we are very clear about our aims, it's easy, I think, for us then to be able to tailor and moderate the way that we interact and the way that we are able to seek support for what we are looking to achieve. So those are some of the things that I just wanted to tease out here. And I just wanted to bring this back to one of my personal experiences. So you will have seen from my profile that I worked for a period of time in Mauritius. So I went to Mauritius from Financial Conduct Authority in the UK, initially on secondment for 1 year to go and head up the Enforcement Directorate. And I ended up staying there as the Director of Enforcement for about 3 years. And my personal goal at the time was, oh my God, what an absolutely fantastic opportunity for me to step into the ultimate leadership role. And I was going to take my experience from the UK, and there was a particular project that I had to deliver when I got to Mauritius, and I was really quite focused on that. I think, for me, the lesson that I took away from that, particularly around leadership and managing upwards, was I was going from one environment and the culture was fundamentally different to the one that I was going into. I was coming from the UK, where having worked in the UK by then for about 20, nearly 30 years, into this environment, which by its very nature was very African, very deferential, highly capable, with a lot of weight placed on formal education. So I worked in an organization where the average person, no matter how junior they were in the office, probably had a master's degree. So highly capable, highly educated from that perspective, compared to an environment I was in the UK, where the educational mix was very, very, very diverse. Right from somebody who had started in the role at the organization from when they were 16, and had worked their way all the way up to head of department level. That would be a no-no. So my expectations in going into a place like Mauritius is that actually lots of people would have the hands-on experience to have, achieved or attained the roles and the positions that they were in, that the hands-on experience would be there. Whereas what I discovered actually was that, yes, there were, lots of people had a really high level of education, which was absolutely good. And actually, I learned more from them than, they necessarily had to learn from me. And I think that self-awareness is actually quite important. So I'm just going to bring that back to personal growth and organizational goals. Of course, I went there with, a view in my mind about what I was going to do, how I was going to finish this project, how it was going to catapult me into XYZ, and how I was going to be able to bring that experience back to the UK. And also I could translate that experience into another offshore jurisdiction, and all of these things. So the plan was there, but the organizational goals that I encountered when I got there meant that I had to deal with things, infinitely differently. How I managed upwards, the sort of communications that I was having, how I approached people. Want to take my brash self to the CEO's office and call him by his first name was a no-no. I was in Mauritius. Did I know? Well, you learn. So I'm just saying that there are strategies in order to ensure that we can communicate with people, in order to ensure that we can convince them and we can persuade them to appreciate our perspective and where we're going and the help that we need, from them. So I just wanted to set out those fundamentals. Adima, can we go on to the last slide now? So when it comes to strategies, and I've spoken a little bit about the environment and the backdrop to what we need to do, and certainly my experience of the things that mattered to me and what I needed to take into consideration. But I'm just going to talk about, so this is where we go into, some of the the academics and some of the, the broad, sort of strategies that we can deploy in managing up. So what I found fundamentally is true through my journey is that one surefire way that I have been able to influence and manage successfully is really to be, pretty good at my job. I think that it brings authenticity and integrity when I'm able to have conversations or I want to bring people along. And it's very difficult really to say that, everything we do around leadership and managing up shouldn't hitch off the back of that. I think it's a very, very strong objective. And in my experience, doing one's job properly and being able to influence upwards from a position of strength and integrity, for me, that sets the talkers, those who are very, very good at selling you stuff. It sets the talkers apart from the achievers, in my view. So that's just my experience. And I think the second one that I just highlighted here is about building trust, respecting boundaries and confidences. And I think here I mean staying true to one's values. And there's no doubt that we're in a tricky environment right now, both externally, when we look internationally, and that is creating a lot of challenge. So I think it's really important that we remain consistent. And I think that we hold true to our own morals and our own values. And for me, that is something that I go back to each and every time. It's very easy, I think, to say quite, offhand, and off pattern, say, oh, well, those are not my values. And, I would never do that in any circumstances. And sometimes we are tested. We are tested in terms of loyalty. We are tested in terms of, how we treat people. We're also tested around, how we manage information and how we are sensitive to others' needs. And we often, forget about what this means for other people to have confidence in us. So what I would say is aligned with trust is also respecting boundaries. As managers, we are in such privileged positions. We get a lot of information about others. And it may be tempting. It may be tempting to, to say to our teams, don't worry, you know what, I'm pals with the boss, I'll go and talk to him for you. Or, I can influence him, or he's just going to do what I say, and don't worry, I can get that information through. But that of itself can be quite counterproductive in some ways, because it can label you as somebody who might ingratiate themselves in order to curry favor, or someone who cannot be discreet. So, I would always say building trust goes both ways, but we always want to be that person who I think our superiors and our managers trust, and also our teams, have some faith in, and know that we have a level of integrity and we will stay true to our own values. Now, communication. I mentioned communication earlier. We've spoken a little bit about that, a little bit about the language of the workplace. But the one thing that I would want to tease out here is sometimes we need to make ourselves a little bit indispensable. And we can only do that by keeping informed about what's going on around us and thinking about the best way to disseminate that down to others. So bringing others into our universe and into our environment. And the one thing that comes up continuously for me is how much information is enough information. when I'm trying to relay information to my managers or my superiors, when I am expecting information from my team to help me navigate a particular issue, what is a level of information that is going to be sufficient or I'm going to find useful? And there's no one answer to that, but I do think that the fundamental to that is it depends on who I'm dealing with. I would brief an accountant differently to how I brief a lawyer. Both would depend, however, on how much time they have to absorb the information and also what I need to tell them and how quickly I need to get them that information. Look, we all know that bad news travels really, really fast, faster than good news. So it's also important, I think, for me to ensure all of those around me are not taken by surprise. So those are some of the things. But I think the language of the organization, whether that is whether that language is verbal or non-verbal, and the way that the organization operates and disseminates information is very good. Is very important. Feedback. Feedback is probably one of the trickiest strategies that I think we will encounter, because look, everybody knows and everybody recognizes when they have received honest, constructive feedback that was delivered in the right way. We all know how that feels. We all know what that looks like. But we also know that not everybody is good at receiving feedback or wants feedback or even encourages feedback. So for me, feedback is about picking the right time, being genuine, constructive, not complaining, being respectful and honest, being specific. And also to the person that we're giving feedback to, be they our superior. And I think actually it's important to give, our superiors, the people who we're managing upwards to give them an opportunity to give us their opinion and not necessarily present them with what we think is their, are the answers. And advocating for what we need. So advocating for what we need, what I mean here is we know our strengths. And harnessing our skills and leveraging our skills is very, very important. But we also need to be bold about speaking up. And for me, and I'm talking from the position of a senior manager, I recognize that the people around me who, often manage upwards, to me, have a right to be taken seriously. And that only comes from having the confidence, I think, to advocate for yourself, whether individually, directly to that person, or, around, because there are other strategies also to deploy. Knowing when to quit. So I am not for a moment suggesting that this is about quitting the job. That's not where I'm going with that. But knowing when to quit is, recognizing when the strategies we are deploying just isn't working, it's not getting us there. And being prepared to reevaluate, go back to the drawing board, think about the things that we want to, operating outside the box and challenging ourselves about, how we're able to deploy. And sometimes it's about going around, sometimes it's about going over, the people who we're dealing with in a constructive way. But just recognizing that there may well be times when we say, you know what I'm doing here isn't quite working. Sometimes that may lead us in a slightly different direction outside of the organization that we're in, or outside the, sort of the environment immediately that we're in. But, all those things I think are contextual, but it's recognizing and taking the time to make sure that we are giving these things the right amount of consideration and the right amount of time to think about what we are doing and whether we are succeeding. So look, I've gone on quite a while there with my talk. And I'm just looking at the time and I can't believe that it's now past 7. So I'm going to stop here. But if anybody has any questions, and I know there were some things coming through, on the chat, I'd be, delighted to be able to see if I can answer them. And I hope you've enjoyed what I've said so far.
Thank you so much, Francesca. I could listen to you like all day. Thank you so much for impacting so much with so many key takeaways. A lot of things stood out. I think the first thing you talked about your environment, your culture plays a key role in terms of your perception and leadership, right? And even how you think about the ambitions or the goals that you can set for yourself, right? So that picture image that you talked about, oh, when you thought about a leader, right? You never really thought, I mean, your description was very visual for us to understand that it wasn't even someone that you thought looks like you, which is quite interesting. Some of us maybe consciously, unconsciously may have had that image, right, in our minds and in our thoughts. So it's really good to kind of like put that out so that today, when you go back home, when you think of a leader, right, who do you think of? What comes to mind? What's the image of a leader that you have in mind? Because again, I believe that everything starts in your mind. As I believe in visualization. You see it, you can be it. You can see it either in your vision, you can see it either, I mean, in the world around you. So it's very important. And the other thing as well, you said that was language and communication, right? There are certain places again, sometimes we call it code switching, but I think that's a different thing entirely. Language and communication in business is very different, especially when you get into a room, right, to have conversations. You said, if I were speaking to an accountant, I'll speak differently, right? If you're speaking to a lawyer, right? Because then I think there's a bit of empathy there, right? When you're thinking of the person I'm speaking to, I want them to understand what I'm saying, as opposed to I just want to talk at them, right? So that's a very good point. Um, there were other things as well. Let me see. There's
Yeah.
a lot of comments in the chat. So those are my two key takeaways, right? From the
Mhm.
talks. I hope you guys also learned a thing or two. I'm gonna check in the chat now. And then now, do we have questions? So let me see.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions.
Awesome. I'll hand it over to you to read them out if that's okay. What?
Perfect. So we have a question here from Yolanda, and I'm just going to read it out. So, first of all, she says, very informative session. Her question would be around resources. So you mentioned that we have a lot of access to those, and she's just interested in knowing what resource you found useful, like your, favorite books on leadership and so on.
Right. Thank you very much. Look, there's a plethora of information out there. So I joined I was a very, very early member in my career of the Institute of Directors. I wasn't a full member. I was one of those student members. And the reason that I joined it was because I wanted the perspective of professionals. And I also wanted to be able to sort of mingle and mix and take on things. So a lot of the materials that I picked up were from fora like that, the Institute of Directors. There's one in the UK and there's one in Ireland. There and I also picked up on, so there's a gentleman called Matthew. I think what I will do is I will drop a number of sources. Perhaps I can drop them to Edima and the team, for onward sharing, if you'd like me to do that. To share, some of my sources, and I can ping them out to you. What I do know also is that I tend not to just look for sources that speak to my own profession. So, because I find that some of the articles and some of the books that speak to leadership in health and social care, or speak to leadership in engineering, or speak to leadership among the sort of pharmaceutical regulator, while they're in a slightly different setting, some of the underlying fundamentals can be quite insightful, and they speak to different scenarios, perhaps in our lives, or, to the people who are around us. So I don't just stick to what I think will be useful to me as a leader, in a regulatory, organization. So I will also share some of those, and I will drop them to you, Edima, and the team, sort of
Yeah.
after this. Yes.
I think so. Just one thing to draw back in terms of what you said, the intentionality or in terms of like the resources you went after to get involved in. And I think as well within our community, we just wait. Sometimes things come to us, or we just, like you said, you put your head down, you're gonna do the job and get promoted. I love that you, even though at that point where you weren't a director yet, you positioned yourself. That's what I'm saying. Position yourself, right? In networks, part of conversations where you can learn those things quite earlier on, right? Because when you learn the same thing that your peers are learning, honestly, you're probably going to be in the same level in a couple of years. But when you, like you did, sign up into that leadership directors forum, I'm sure there were things that you were sort of projecting into your future, thinking, making you be more futuristic, where your career is going to be in 5 years time, in 10 years time, as opposed to, okay, in a year's time, this is what I want to do. So that's good. Please feel free to send us the resource and we'll add it in the follow-up email. And we also put it on our website as well. Nina,
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jadema. Thank you so much, Francesca. So we have a question here from Toyosi, and it says, my question is from personal experience. How do you extract what you need and articulate ourselves to own into what is important for the company, especially when it doesn't align with your core value or they are not keeping you in mind?
Oh, that's a big one. Gosh, let me just think about that for a minute. So there's something about compartmentalizing. And this may almost feel sometimes that it runs slightly contrary to what, some of the things that I've said. But sometimes breaking things up so that I can, sort of focus on, a particular area or a particular issue is my way sometimes to navigate, some of the bigger issues. So this is what I mean. So if I felt I've had projects where I felt that the outcome of the project or what I wanted to achieve didn't necessarily align with, I felt, how other parts of the organization saw them or the outcomes that other parts of the organization wanted. And I had to do a lot of influencing and persuading to get people round to my way of thinking. If I felt, for instance, that the task was so big and that there were so many facets to what we wanted to do or what I wanted to do and where I wanted to bring people along, I would take it in stages. I would, the building blocks is what I say. I would create those building blocks and take people along the journey. So that's one way of doing it. But I think that is different to a concept where you think this is about fundamentally my values. Do I believe in what this organization is about? Do I believe, and does it align with how, my view of the world? And I think that's slightly different. And what I would say there is, one, challenge myself. What is it I haven't understood? What are those values that are jarring with me? And is there some way to, is there a meeting in the middle? If there can't be a meeting in the middle, then I need to give myself, a really, really hard talking to as to whether or not I'm in the right space. So, but again, if there's anything that I can do to, sort of answer this question in a bit more depth, I'm more than happy to do that.
thanks so much, Jessica. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can.
Nina, over to you. I think there's one more question in the chat.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much, Francesca. I think we even have two more. I'm going to take Yolanda's first, then we'll go to the final one because I asked that question. Okay, so Yolanda is asking, my other question would be around strategies on communication. That is, how to get your peers to engage, especially when it is difficult to meet in person, to hold meetings and to communicate, and when communication needs to be online rather.
So can you just run the latter part by me again, when it is difficult to get people to engage?
So how to get your peers to engage, especially when it is difficult to meet in person and to hold meetings, and communication needs to be online.
So that is the challenge of our times, isn't it? Hybrid working. working, working in, remotely, it is brilliant. And I should have said from the outset that I'm a job sharer. So I work 3 days a week. I job share with an absolutely fantastic lady, and job sharing, I think, at my level is very, very unique. So I am deeply, deeply privileged. But I think I also understand the challenge here, which is when we're not all in the same place, when we can't have those organic conversations that sometimes allow us to cut through, a whole load of noise. How do we manage? How do we manage that? And the only thing that I can think of there is, number one, so it clearly depends on, on sort of the topic and what the communication needs to be about. But there's something about breaking down silos. And the only thing that I can say there is sometimes you need to take it away from the very issue that you're looking to talk about or you're looking to discuss, and find ways to build that rapport outside of that issue, to get that rapport going, so that there's a slightly easier segue back into talking about the work and talking about the things that you need their engagement on. Look, there are different strategies around this, but I have to say the world of working remotely and hybrid working, actually, we are only so many years from COVID that has accelerated that. And I think all organizations are learning to navigate this. We're just starting to realize what it means for us socially, psychologically, and, how we are able to bring people along. So I would go back to the fundamentals of communication. What is it we're trying to communicate? What other ways are there to be able to break down those silos so that we can get to the people who we need to touch base with, and do that? Look, time management and diary management is very, very important, I think, for hybrid working. Look, the values of around work-life balance will always be there, and I don't think those will go away. But I think we can find an affinity. We can all find something to anchor us into, so that we can then gently move into the area that we need to be. So I'm talking in very general terms, because obviously I don't know the precise context here. But I would say building rapport outside of the core issue probably is a way to sort of break down barriers, so that you can then get to your colleagues or get to your team, and be able to get to the issue that you need to discuss or you need engagement on.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Francesca. So we're going to take the final question now. And this is a question that I'm asking. So I'm just wondering how you can build influence without necessarily having like a formal authority in your organization. I know, the whole webinar is kind of structured around leaders, but I'm just conscious that it starts somewhere. So how do you, build influence without having that, authority, if that makes any sense? Thank you.
So I'm just going to replay this to make sure that I understand it. How do you influence without being a senior person yourself? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Right. How do you influence? So, look, I don't think the strategies are any different to, some of the things that I've already said. I think that is about being present is one thing. I think it is about understanding the pressures of the people around you and their drivers, so that you, in your communication, you can speak to those things in the way that they understand. I mean, look, a very basic thing that I mentioned was not, that I mentioned in my discussion around being in an environment where you're having to work to people who, are, very busy. So what I like from my team, and I'm going to put myself in this, and the people who I work with, is some appreciation from them of the sort of issues that I have to consider. So if you have an understanding and an appreciation of the drivers and pressures and issues, of what your manager or other people who you want to start this rapport with, if you understand where they are coming from, I think it's easy then to find that way in and find that way to be able to connect with them. Because I think influencing, managing upwards is all about connection and building relationships. And how do we build relationships? It is tapping into those things that would resonate with people and are important to people. So just taking it back, somebody who is a little bit more junior to me, but understands that I might find a particular article interesting because at a team meeting, I spoke about, I don't know, strategies to be able to, IT strategies might, would definitely pique my interest. If after the meeting they sent me something and say, look, you just spoke about this. I've come across this article, I've come across this piece of software. Would this be of interest to you? That automatically gets on my radar. So it's about understanding, what is this person dealing with? How can I help them? Or how can I be of assistance? Might be a way, one, to break that communication barrier and to get you insight. So it sounds really Machiavellian, and I'm really sorry to have to, to have to put it that way. But for me, influencing, managing upwards, leadership, being seen, being visible, is about rapport and is about connection. So I hope that helps.
That makes sense. Rapport and connection, right? And because you can always find common values with people, you can always find common interests, whether it's, their professional journey or hobbies. It's finding out those things is, I think sometimes we're building rapport and connection even in the workplace. We always think it has to be something serious. Maybe not. It could be, I don't know, you like their outfit again, and it's something that again is a skill that you have to learn over and over again. It's not a one-off thing. So we're gonna wrap up our Q&A because our time is fast well spent. We've gone over by what 6 minutes. Just quickly gonna wrap that off to share. First of all, thank you so much, Francesca, for sharing your wisdom with us.
You're welcome.
Inspirational. If you take anything away from this call, is that you can do it. If she has done it, she shared her knowledge, she shared her wisdom, and Francesca is also willing to have follow-up conversations. If you have any questions, reach out to her on LinkedIn. But don't disturb. Well, I was gonna say don't disturb her, right? You're open to people approaching you with questions and all that. Feel free to connect with her and ask her questions as well. And one thing that I was going to say is mentorship, sponsorship is such an important thing as well when you're looking to move up, right? What you don't know, but there's someone else that can probably, again, give you that wisdom and counsel. So feel free. This is me kind of advertising Francesca now as a mentor. I don't know if something should take on, but feel free to reach out to her, get the coaching, get the questions answered, get the support that you need, and that leads us to the next thing. As I said earlier on when we started, APNI is a platform that provides support for businesses and professionals of African descent. One thing we do every year is around providing support for our businesses around close to Africa Day, because then there's a lot of innovation, there's a lot of talent within our community, and we have this program called Lions Den. So think of Dragons Den, low budget. No, I'm joking, because you still win money at the end of the day. So Lions Den is a pitch competition where businesses, if you're a startup founder, if you're thinking of starting a business at ideation stage, proof of concept, traction not in the case that you're already making like ample revenue, but traction stage where you've gotten some percentage of customers, but you still need more. So this is an opportunity for you to send us your business idea, your business plan, where we have a couple of judges who are going to go through your business pitch and put you forward to pitch live at our Lions Den event. So What does that entail? We have a call for application open at the moment, which if you're following us on LinkedIn and Instagram, you'll see the link to apply. So essentially, again, like I said, it's a platform to inspire you, to encourage you and support you on your entrepreneurship journey. The program started in 2017, but now it has metamorphosed, where this year we want to partner the pitch competition, not partner, but create more of a holistic experience for our community, where certain people can pitch their business ideas, and where others who already have existing product and services can also advertise their product and services to the community and also sell it. In the last 3-4 years, we've awarded 21,000 grants in to I think about 5 businesses or 6 businesses so far, and 93 businesses have sent us their pitch deck. So feel free, it doesn't have to be perfect, right? You just have to do it. This, as you see on the screen, is Samantha, is the winner from last year, and Samantha has gone on now to do incredible things for her business, which is an AI embedded 24 hours translator app. Again, just to give you an idea, 3 winners will be selected as overall winners to win the prizes, which we have 5,000 euro, 3,000 euros and 2,000 euros. Don't quote me on the price, but please check our Instagram for more information in terms of the cash prize. Next thing we're going to do, like I mentioned, is the business exhibition or business bazaar, where you can come sell your products and acquire new businesses, and most importantly, network as well and raise awareness around your product. So how can you get involved? Please, I'm going to give a second for you to scan the QR code on the screen. There's a website just at the very top on our link tree bio. Click on that link, you get information around how to sign up for Lions Den, or if you want to exhibit that day as a business or a vendor, please use the link as well. What other ways can you get involved with APNI? Sign up on our website to become a member. And if you're on this call and you know that, well, your company might be interested in partnering with APNI, please do feel free to reach out to our team at info@apni.ie. And also, one thing that helps us as well is around engagement on our social media posts. Please feel free to like, comment, and share. And on that note, I will say thank you so much for joining us. This is just our social media handle. If you follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, there's details on our website. And on that note, thanks so much for your time.
Yeah.
Thank you so much to the APNI team for putting all of this together. And thank you for spending your evening with us. I think I had stopped sharing my screen.
Thank you.
Stop sharing. Thank you so much and have a great evening.
Bye-bye.